Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. It's a little special edition on a Saturday of this show. Nekias Duncan is here. We're going to talk everything Jimmy Butler now that the shit has hit the fan and everything has happened. Jimmy Butler has been suspended. The trade rumors are flowing. We want to dive deep into everything there. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What's this gonna be? Oh! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Nekias, what's going on, man?
Hello. Happy Saturday. Happy New Year, first and foremost. Happy to be here, though. It's been a little minute since I've been on Game Theory Pod. Happy to be back.
It is so good to have you back on, Nekias. I just feel like you and Steve have like a million things going on, and I'd never want to bother you. I am so happy to have you here, though. It's a blast. I did a episode of your show recently. We talked about all the rookies, and I'm so glad that you're here to chat about the Jimmy Butler thing, because everyone, I think people who know that you pay close attention to the Miami Heat. You know what's going on. You have a finger on the pulse, so to speak. How are you doing, though? Is everything's good with you? Everything's rolling right along?
Everything's good on my end. Through the context of the Heat, it has been a little bit of an annoying season to track, honestly. It's like, hey, cool, Tyler Hero's doing stuff. Will Bam hit shots today? Hey, cool,
Yeah.
It's Jimmy Butler as a screener. And now it's Jimmy Butler waves arms wildly. It's Khalil Ware. This is cool. Jaime Jaquez. What has happened? As a concept, it's been one of those.
It's a weird year for the Heat. And I guess I want to start here. Let's just kind of get people updated on the news before we really dive into this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Butler has been suspended for conduct detrimental to the team. In a statement released by the Miami Heat yesterday, they said that they are open to listening for trade offers. They mentioned that this has been happening for several weeks now, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a huge surprise. If you look at Jimmy's last two games, I'm just going to say it. My dude took 11 shots in 50 minutes. That's not good enough. When you're Jimmy Butler, I feel pretty good saying that the effort wasn't quite there. And look, he said as much after the game. He did an interview or a press conference. I'm sorry. Was asked by, I believe, Tim Reynolds of the Associated Press. And there might have been Barry Jackson. I can't remember which of the two Miami guys it was. But he basically said, I don't have a lot of joy playing basketball right now. And then was asked straight up, do you think you can refine that joy here in Miami? And his response was, quote, probably not. And that's when shit hit the fan. Really, they end up suspending him. That's where we sit right now. Here's where I want to start with this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these last two games have kind of colored the perception of Jimmy Butler, the player, a little bit. Rachel in the YouTube comments asks, I know it's a story that gets clicks, but is Jimmy Butler actually relevant in 2025? Nekias, I'll ask you that question. Do you think Jimmy Butler is still an excellent basketball player? We don't have to talk about is he still a max player? Is he this? Is he that? Is he still a player that you think could swing a title race in 2025?
Oh, absolutely. Especially the fully engaged version. It doesn't even have to be playoff Jimmy. I think just in general, a guy that can give you 18 to 20 points, 6 boards, can play make for you, is comfortable operating pick and roll and being the screener for you to hunt for mismatches or otherwise. And someone that can hold up on ball and can just blow stuff up off the ball, again, when fully engaged. He is absolutely someone that can swing a title race for you. So I think he is still very much relevant.
So in the 11 games before this little injury, and then these two games where I think that we can just say clearly didn't give a shit out there. In the 11 games before that, Jimmy Butler was averaging 22 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists while shooting 60% from the field, while the Miami Heat went 8-3 during that run.
Mhm.
Jimmy was a monster during that little stretch. He was so good. Like he and Hero were like holding up the offense. He and Bam were holding up the defense. Like they were insanely good during that little stretch. That was this part of the season that like really got them kind of back on the rails a little bit after a crazy start. So Jimmy Butler 100% to me can swing a title race when he's fully engaged. And here's the thing with Jimmy Butler. When he gets to a new spot, things tend to be cool for a minute. Like we could talk about how it ended in Minnesota. We could talk about how it's going to end here in Miami. It tends to be pretty cool up until that, like, you know, maybe 2 to 5 year window, somewhere in that range. It might turn poorly, but things are going to be probably fine because he's probably going to go. He's going to be engaged. Now, the complicating factor here with Jimmy is the contract.
Yeah.
He is owed, I believe, $48 million this year and $52 million next year.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that deal for Jimmy Butler in this current iteration?
I think that's, especially within the context of like what's happening with the Heat right now, like that's where I just kind of go back and forth with it, because I understand from the Heat perspective, you know, 34, 35 years old, you may opt into this 52 mil. I'm sure he wants, if not the max, at the very least close to it, and or years on top of that. And I get why you wouldn't want to do that if you don't feel like you are like apex contender in the Eastern Conference or in the league at large. But I'm sure, I mean, I've seen other people make this comment, and I'll make it like half jokingly. If Paul George got a max, and this is kind of what his season has been so far, I can understand why Jimmy Butler is like, hey, I've been better than that this year. I have taken you to the finals twice, into the Eastern Conference Finals another time. Clearly, and you mentioned the 11-game stretch right before he ended up getting sick in this 2-game stretch. It's not like he's just fallen off of a cliff. Like I will say, on balance, even when fully engaged, like I don't think the defense it's probably been like a little level below all defense level for him. It's not the same Jimmy we're used to on a possession by possession basis on that front. So like that part's starting to slip, but he's still a positive on that end.
Yeah.
And so I understand why he would want that kind of money. And so moving forward, I have no idea what this next contract is going to look like, because if he opts out, I'm assuming he wants, again, a multi-year deal. There aren't like 12 good teams with cap space that can drive a bidding war for him. And if he opts into that 52 mil, like that's probably fine. But then what does it look like another year into the career with more mileage? We'll see how many regular season games he plays, you know, next season, wherever he ends up being. I really don't have a firm handle on it. Like that's probably a bad answer, but like I really don't know where you go, because he's just at a really interesting intersection of his career right now.
So I think that you said like you don't really know, but I think you actually framed it really well, because people on the NBA side don't really know is the thing. Like I spent yesterday, like we talked before this, like I was, you know, on the phones, text messages, everything like that. And I wrote a thing that's coming at The Athletic tomorrow, kind of trying to figure out like where the landing spot could be for Jimmy. And we'll talk about that kind of at the end of this, but teams are really trying to figure this out. Like they're not sure what the asset value of Jimmy is, like what his open market value is, and whether or not, like there are going to be teams that would almost like, honestly, I think that if he was willing, if he's going to be real about this and say, this isn't about the money, this isn't about this isn't about that, if he would decline his player option right now, like just decline it right now so that he's hitting free agency, and he is, according to Shams, said, you know, hey, I'm, you know, I intend to decline, or he hasn't said this to Shams, but Shams has reported, I'm sorry, that he intends to decline this player option to hit free agency. Then if you want to hit like the best possible landing spot for you right now in season, it would actually help, I think, to decline the player option like right now, because that's a real factor for teams. They're worried that he's going to pick up this player option and end up in a situation that they don't find advantageous, right? Because either he picks up the player option because something has gone wrong, or he doesn't pick up the player option and you lose him in half of a year. And I think there are teams that would be happy to just have him for this little playoff run and then be able to cut their ties. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But another factor here with Jimmy, and part of the reason why I think teams are worried about that player option is, do you know when the last time Jimmy Butler played more than 65 games in a season was?
It's been a minute. Like, this is what, if not Chicago days, like maybe early Minnesota.
Yeah, it's actually Chicago. It's 2016-17 is the last time he played 65 games in a season. So you cannot rely on Jimmy Butler for more than, at this point, I would argue 60 points in a season, or 60 games in a season. I'm sorry. That makes things really complicated because teams want guys who are going to play at the end of the day. That's not an unfair sentiment. NBA executives want players who are going to be on the court. And to me, that is kind of the difference between him and Paul George. Paul George had the injury questions kind of coming into this, but Paul George played 74 games last year too. We can talk about what his injury history was before that as well, where he played 48, 54, 31, and 56 back to back to back to back. But it is on some level a what have you done for me lately situation. And PG played all those games last year. And by the way, Paul George was awesome last year. Like I had him, I can't remember if I had him all NBA, but like if I didn't, he was one of my final cuts for sure. So you look at that. Then there's also, in terms of like the trade dynamics, right? The collective bargaining agreement is a document that is incredibly frustrating to deal with for teams right now. They're trying to figure out flexibility. They're trying to figure out how to stay below the first apron, the second apron, everything like that. But beyond that, and this is where I'll ask you this question, and this is where teams that I talked to yesterday just didn't know the answer to this, in all honesty. What do you think the Miami Heat's objectives are in a Jimmy Butler trade? Like, do you think that they want to stay competitive now? Do you think that they want to maximize asset value, moving forward? Do you think they want expiring money in order to stay, flexible in the summer and things like that, like the Clippers did? I don't know for sure. I would guess it's probably like a blend of all of those factors in some respect. But what do you think it is that Miami would be looking for?
I think if I had to guess, they would want talent that they could play right now / expirings. Like,
yeah,
if you're asking me what I would prefer, like, I think go with the deal that gets you the most picks so you can finally get back in the green on some of these assets. You can actually put yourself in the room for some of the disgruntled stars that you've been trying to land. That's what I would do, just based on how Miami has handled this over the past like half decade. Like, we'll use Houston as an example. I know we'll go through teams. Like, I'm sure they'll be fine with like, let's get the Dylan Brooks or Fred VanVleet salary, since that isn't going to be long term, but you're still good. It can help Tyler and Bam, etc. Like, that kind of package, I think, is what they will probably be looking for more than big expiring that we don't care about young dudes picks.
Yeah, I've been trying. So like, I tried to figure this out again. Like, I have a whole thing like on this tomorrow. I've been trying to figure out like what exactly the package is that works for them. I do think it's like I would guess that their ideal is good players on expiring deals plus picks, basically. Like, I would think that that's probably what they want, because then they can forward those along. Right. Almost any way that you do that with any team that Jimmy would want to go to, or any non-contending team, like the Brooklyn Nets could very easily decide to get involved in this if they want to. They have the massive Ben Simmons expiring contract. I can't imagine the Brooklyn Nets getting involved in this. They're trying to tank this thing out. They're trying to end up at the top of this upcoming draft for Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, whoever. It doesn't really make sense for them. But like, almost all these deals are going to have to involve a third team, basically, in my opinion, to achieve all of those goals, because there are very few teams. Houston is one of them, between the VanVleet deal that has a team option for next year and the $41 million they have in expiring contracts with who is it? It's Jayshawn Tate, Jock Lawndale, Steven Adams, Aaron Holiday, and Jeff Green.
Mhm.
So they can mechanically make it work if they want to, but I'll be honest, like, do you think Houston wants to do that? I don't, it doesn't seem like their MO right now.
I don't think so. Like, I feel like if they're going to aim for a star, like they would want a younger one naturally. Like, I think
That's what I think too.
let's see what happens with Phoenix and with the De'Aaron Fox thing. Let's see what happens there. And we could just have same amount of we have the salary still, we have the picks, we have young prospects. Like, we could just aim for a younger star to grow with Şengün versus the Jimmy thing. Like, this feels like a house money season for them.
I kind of agree. That's what it feels like to me too whenever I watch them. Like, it feels like, okay, this isn't what our peak is going to be yet. So let's just kind of let it roll and see where we end up in a minute there. And if they really wanted to, you know, football CF Candy brings up like Zach LaVine's chilling right there. Like, it would be very easy for them to get Zach LaVine if they want just like a shot creator to upgrade on Jalen Green. Right. That would be super simple. Now, Jimmy Butler is better than Zach LaVine. Like, there's no doubt about that. And it would be shorter term, which they might value in some respect. But like the Houston deal, that any Houston deal to me that makes sense for them, they would want to keep Fred VanVleet, because if you're trading for Jimmy Butler, you're trying to max out this year. Right. And Fred helps you do that. And Fred's a really good fit with Jimmy too. So to me, like, any deal with Miami has to involve Jalen Green, and you have his poison pill deal, and you'd have to find a landing spot, because I would guess that Miami probably doesn't want Jalen Green. So like, could you find, my idea was like Brooklyn maybe might take a flyer on Jalen Green, and then you can shoot some of their expiring deals down to Miami. But like, that would be a pure asset play from Miami at that point, where like Houston sending them a pick, Miami or Brooklyn sending them a pick to get Jalen Green. Like, I don't know. That feels complicated to me.
Yeah. Like, I don't think they would want to do that. And again, I would probably prefer Miami just does the asset thing and just, hey, give the ball to Tyler, give it to Bam, let the young guys play. If they fall into the play-in or out of the play-in, like, it's fine, because I believe they have their own first this year, and then 2026 is where it gets complicated again. Like, I would do that, but I don't know if Miami has the appetite for that. Like, all the evidence shows they don't have the appetite for that. They've done, to their credit, a really good job of kind of building out of the middle, like going back to, the 30-11 run in 2016-17. They signed Deion, signed James Johnson, doesn't go well to get out of those contracts, eventually get out of Hassan. They get Jimmy, and then it's all of this. Like, that generally isn't how building or breaking yourself out of the middle is supposed to go. But I don't know. It's just, in the broader scope, it feels like they've kicked this can as far down the road as they possibly can. And in light of what the CBA is now, how important picks are for these kind of trades, what free agency is right now, because everyone's just kind of locking in these contracts, they just kind of need to get some more picks in the building.
I think so too. I think that'd be a really big help. And like Eric Olson brings up, like, doesn't Miami not build through the draft really? I mean, I think that's like kind of a misnomer, just going back to the LeBron days. Like, they were able to hit LeBron and Chris Bosh, right, in free agency. But I mean, you look at all the dudes that have come through this organization: Bam, Tyler, Hawkes, Nikola Jovic, Khalil Ware, he might be something. Like, they actually have had like a pretty real amount of success in the draft, and that's really what sustained this run. And then augmenting it with free agency, like going to get Jimmy Butler or something like that, right? Like, it's not just we're building through free agency, we're building through the draft. Like, I think that they do as good of a job almost as anybody of building through the draft and also augmenting it with free agency and figuring it out from there and kind of blending the two together.
Yeah, like, I think they've done a really good job. Just the Sioux Falls system in general has just been really good for them in terms of the free agency portion, like being able to nail some of these flyers and turn them into legit rotation pieces. I think that just becomes louder as we get into situations like this. But yeah, they've done a little bit of everything, like hitting on Hero, hitting on Bam at the back end of the lottery. I think Precious Achiuwa over Tyrese Maxey probably haunts him a little bit, if I had to guess. So obviously you can't bat 1,000 on that, but Miami has generally done a good job with their picks, to your point.
Yeah. So before we get into like real landing spots here, right? Do you feel like Jimmy is like kind of overplayed his hand here? Because that was kind of my immediate reaction to this was Jimmy like goes public and says like he's lost his joy or whatever. I almost feel like he expected like public sentiment. Maybe he didn't expect public sentiment to be on his side. Maybe he was just like speaking extemporaneously and just kind of went for it. But I almost feel like he expected like people to be like, oh yeah, like, feel bad for you, Jimmy. Like, I get it. And the reality is like, dude, you're making like $50 million to be like the face of an organization, my guy. Like if you're not happy, like we're cool with that. And like, we respect it, but I can't say I've got a lot of sympathy either. Right. Like it's all good. And like, you've done this multiple times now. Like you went into a practice with the Minnesota Timberwolves, decided to pick up with the third team and yell at Tom Thibodeau and Scott Layden, you fucking need me. Like, I mean, this is not a new sentiment for you, unfortunately, Jimmy. Like, do you think this is going how he expected it to go? I guess like that's kind of my question here.
I don't think so. And I think to your broader point, I think it's less people feel bad for Jimmy and more people want to laugh at the Heat a little bit, which I think is fair. It's fair in some respects, for sure. But like to your point, I don't think Jimmy's really gotten the sentiment. It's been really weird with this 2-game stretch in particular because of the trade rumblings and like the Bernie Lee versus Shams of it all, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's kind of gone under the radar. Like he was legit sick. One.
Yeah.
And so I don't have much for you on what was it, the Indiana game? Like that was just kind of tough.
Yeah.
But like the New Orleans, like that game was on January 1st. The last game he played was December 20th. Like this was a legit thing for him. And through the broader context of Jimmy Butler in Miami, it's not like we've never seen an 8, 9, 10 shot attempt game for Jimmy. Like he just kind of does this in the regular season sometimes, even when nothing's wrong. It's just, I'm just going to feel this out because it's November 14th and we're going to let these guys do it. And so to your overplaying the hand point, he probably shouldn't have, offered me to say that to like another grown man, but like probably wasn't ideal to have that kind of pressure 2 games in. If he was trying to build a kind of sentiment, like he really could have just leaned on the fact that, hey, I just got back.
Right.
And to your point, like you pointed out the 11-game stretch earlier in the pod, like it's not like he was just playing.
No, like
he was good.
Up until these 2 games, like I had no questions about what was going on with Jimmy. Like he was playing hard, he was playing exceptionally well. Like no, I had no questions up until these 2 games where it's like, okay, 11 shots in 50 minutes, like not really attacking in the way that like we typically see him attack in some ways. You're 100% right that like he does feel out games in the regular season like pretty regularly, but I don't know. These 2 felt the New Orleans game particularly, like that one felt like, okay, there's something's up here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I ended up tweeting out the sequence, which I should have probably been more specific in my actual tweet, but he takes the one-legged 3 and then Trey Murphy just cashes home like a 35-foot pull-up. And I was just like, well, this is one of the sequences of all time. I was really more focused on the Trey thing than the Jimmy thing. But like when you have these kind of rumblings and then you have the quiet shot attempt game and you have like that specific shot attempt, it's so easy to lean into, oh, well, he's not taking shots tonight. He hates it here. He's ready to get out of here. This is a protest. Right. When, again, if you've been watching Miami for a while, and to be fair, that could also just be part of the Miami frustration. This isn't new for him during some regular season games. And so I think going from that right into the probably not and talk about the role and stuff like that, it's harder to kind of build the sentiment. And again, with the backdrop of people kind of want to laugh at Miami because of the mystique of the culture and how heavy-handed they can be with some stuff.
Yeah.
They're fresh off of not getting Damian Lillard after not getting insert star here, etc. Like the attention is more towards the heat of it all and what's going on with Pat Riley and what is the decision-making tree, etc. More than I feel bad for Jimmy. Because I think aside from him legit being sick, I can understand his frustration. Like, I think for him, part of let me just make it through the regular season healthy and having some of these quieter games is because I can put up 37-7 in a postseason run. And I have to lift and carry the offenses for stretches or carry it on both ends in some aspects because we don't have like a no doubt about it top 5, top 6 player. Like he kind of has to play over his head. And I can understand you're a basketball player, you get paid, et cetera, et cetera. But in a vacuum, why do I need to play 74 games in the regular season at max effort with somewhat clunky fits and then turn into a top 5 guy on top of that? And then when I reportedly, whatever, I asked for, Kyle Lowry, I asked for Damian Lillard, et cetera. We get Lowry, and then that ends weirdly, to say the least. And we don't get Dame. Okay, where's my help after I've done all of this? Like, there's room to feel that kind of empathy for Jimmy. But because of how it's all kind of gone about, I don't think he's going to get all of that.
Yeah, and you're not wrong that, like, I do tend to be somebody, like, this isn't a secret for people who listen to the show. I do tend to be somebody that sides with the players on a lot of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. This one, maybe it's like because Jimmy has just done this before and like we've been down this track and like kind of the way he phrased it in that press conference and things like that. And I'm also really interested to know, like, Miami is pretty specific about like the several weeks thing in the release. Like, I would like to know more about like what's going on there too. And like how he has been an issue. I think that this is actually a good point, and this is where we can shift to like teams that are interesting for Jimmy. I think Butler's only worth getting if he's the final piece of a championship like Kawhi in 2019. Mm-hmm. I don't think I disagree with that, at least in terms of it making the most sense. Like, he wouldn't be the last piece of a Houston Rockets championship team in all likelihood, but I could understand them going for it on some level, say like, hey, we want to, have a super high level veteran who's highly competitive, who fits Ime's ethos in some way because he's highly competitive. He's a good two-way player, everything like that. We want to get our younger guys some playoff experience. I can see that on some level too. But like, I do think the places where it makes the most sense are the places where he can be that last piece and are the places where like he can go and be additive to a championship team. And this is where I do want to dive into it. Like, I've seen some people bring up Sacramento, right? Mm-hmm. I think I'm generally fine with it if I was Sacramento, but my issue with that is that you'd have to find landing spots for DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Huerter, probably, because those two have to be involved in the deal, basically. Like, there's not really another mechanism, having run through it yesterday, to really figure out, like, okay, I guess, well, they could trade Malik Monk too instead of Huerter, but, I think they would rather do Huerter for obvious reasons. Miami's not going to want to take back like both of those dudes.
Right.
So you have to have landing spots for DeMar and Huerter, and I don't know who's going to want Huerter. And frankly, like, I'm not totally sure who's going to want DeMar on a big multi-year contract. So I'm not real sure what the only saving grace here, and this is something I've said publicly before, so I don't really have a problem saying it again. Miami loved Devin Carter pre-draft. So like, if they're just looking at this like, hey, we're getting a young guy that we absolutely fucking love pre-draft, and we're willing to take the money on in order to get that player, I would understand that maybe a little bit more on some level. But I don't know that I see Sacramento, if only just because I think that the mechanics to make a deal like that would be incredibly difficult. The easiest way to do it that I was able to find would be Chicago taking DeMar and Huerter, or DeMar or Huerter is like a third team. And I mean, like, look, they had the opportunity to re-sign DeMar if they wanted to last summer, and they chose not to. And then Huerter is, I don't know how much value he brings to Chicago at this point. So, I mean, do you have any thoughts on Sacramento?
Like, I think from Miami side, like, they're trying to figure out the Jimmy thing while also keeping eyes on De'Aaron Fox and seeing if that blows up. And like, I don't think I send Jimmy Butler there and now De'Aaron's happy, and now what are we getting? Is it just whatever happens with DeMar / Kevin Huerter if there's a third team, etc.? You get Devin Carter. Like, I like him for the little bit that I've seen of him or read about him. But again, I always say I'm not a draft person, so I don't really know. So I don't love that.
Yeah.
And even for Sacramento, like, is getting Jimmy probably puts you into the top 6. I don't know if that puts you into like true contention in the West.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I don't know
I'm
if
not
that's
sure
enough.
it does.
Yeah, I don't know if that's enough of a needle mover.
Yeah. I mean, look, like, it feels like they're like scrambling a little bit to try and figure out what they want to do. Like, you know, the Cam Johnson rumors are persistent there as well. Like, I think that they're interested in him. So we'll see what they do. The other team that is like somewhat desperate is Phoenix. And this is where, like, it makes all the sense in the world for Jimmy. It makes no sense for Miami unless you can find a way to forward Bradley Beal somewhere else. And again, like, Bradley Beal's actually been like pretty good this year, and I think that's probably gone under the radar a little bit. He's given real effort defensively. He's averaging like 19 points a game on, I think it's like 49, 38, like 82 or 83 or something like that. Beal's been like pretty good this year, but nobody's taken a deal where he's going to make $60 million in, or I think it's $57 million to be exact, in 2026, 27. Like, that's just not, it's not happening, guys.
Yeah, with the no trade clause on top of that, like,
and he has no trade clause.
So I don't really see Phoenix either, honestly. Like, it's not an expansive list. Like, there are a lot of teams where I just love the basketball fit of engaged Jimmy Butler, but again, you get into the salary of it all and trying to put this together, the list shrinks tremendously.
It really does. I mean, someone in the comments asked about the Nuggets. It's actually way harder mechanically to put that deal together than what people think too.
Yeah.
Because it would have to be like a 4-for-1 where it'd be like MPJ, Zeke Naji. They'd have to find a third spot to put Zeke Naji somewhere and have to give up assets to do that probably. And then it's like Strother and Deron Holmes, I think, is like what you'd have to give up to get to the money, like to where it'd be pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at that point, I don't know if that fixes everything that Denver has an issue with. Like, they'd be crushing their depth, which is already precarious to begin with. And, you know, yeah, Michael Porter Jr. is an upgrade on, or Jimmy Butler's an upgrade on Michael Porter Jr., but like, that doesn't totally track for me at the end of the day. And again, like, there is 0% chance I think that Miami would want to take on that Jamal Murray extension. Like, I certainly would have no desire to take on the Jamal Murray extension. I mean, people have brought up San Antonio. I think that San Antonio is looking for like a younger star to play with Victor, not an older star to play with Victor. Like, they brought in Chris Paul for 1 year, $10 million to be the veteran presence and to be that guy. And Chris Paul's been pretty good this year for them, but like, they're not looking for, I don't think that they're looking for Jimmy to try and contend this year. I think that they're looking for, like, De'Aaron Fox is an interesting name for them to me if Fox was to come available.
Yeah, to your point, they want someone to grow alongside Wemby. That's probably too far in terms of the timelines there. Can I toss a team to you?
Yeah, please.
How do you feel about Memphis?
My favorite. I was going to close with them, but I love that you brought it up. It's my favorite. It's my favorite slot for Jimmy. It's either them or Golden State. We'll talk about Memphis to start here. So if I was Memphis, I mentioned Jimmy kind of declining the player option. I do want to expand on like why he probably shouldn't do that. Frankly, like, if he was to get hurt, like, he should obviously want to have the backdrop of that player option this year, right? He shouldn't give up that $52 million. That would be crazy. But if I'm Memphis, and if I'm Jimmy and I'm like, okay, I can get to a landing spot where I can be the guy potentially on a 23-11 team right now that has like maybe a chance to win with me, I might look at that and go, maybe this is worth the risk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this might be worth doing this. And here's the thing. If I was Memphis, I would only want Jimmy for this year, because here's the thing. If they move, because the way that they would do this mechanically is it would have to involve Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, and Kennard probably would be involved at that point. there are a few other ways to make it work with the third player, but it basically has to involve Marcus Smart and Brandon Clark. And by the way, Brandon Clark's been really good coming back from the Achilles. I don't think they'd be excited about losing Brandon Clark off of this team. When Brandon Clark is on the court, they're beating opponents by like 14.5 points per 100 possessions this year. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, like him plus Jaren has been like plus 12, 13, something like that for like about the last 3 years or so. Like it's been really good when they go to that.
Lights out. But here's the thing. If he was to decline the player option going in and they just look at this as Jimmy for this year, or if they look at it as Jimmy, like, hey, we'll figure it out in the offseason if we want to keep you or not. Or if you want to stay here, like it's a two-way street, right? If he was to leave and they had gotten rid of the Clark and Smart money, they actually open up enough salary cap space to renegotiate and extend Jaren Jackson at that point. So it could actually really help their long-term goals of like hopefully getting Jaren Jackson under contract with a bunch of new money for next season. And they'd be able to keep this core together longer term. So it kind of fills a long-term goal. It kind of fills a shorter-term goal of contending with Jimmy Butler. I think that Jimmy is the kind of like shot creator, two-way wing that they've desperately needed for years upon years now. What do you think of that fit in Memphis?
Oh, I really like it. Like I like Memphis just as a destination because they are, as you mentioned, a really good team that could potentially get this done without touching any of their top 3 players. And like either their top 3 players or any of their like top 5 most important pieces, if we're talking this asset valuation. So they're just in a really unique spot, like similar to Houston. They're in a unique spot to where they could do this without hurting any of their like actual core. As far as the on-court fit, like I love it. Like you get another driver, just a half-court scorer, as Memphis' half-court offense has always been kind of the thing for them. Like having someone that they can rely on more to help boost that, so Ja wouldn't have to do as much as he does. You wouldn't have to lean as much on Jaren catch the ball 23 feet from the basket. Are you going to create an efficient look? To his credit, he's done a really good job creating for himself. But if you can lessen that burden, and if you're Jimmy Butler, I also can just lean on these guys when I need to. That helps. You get a strong defender that's going to be more engaged, assuming he gets traded in Jimmy Butler. So that takes some pressure off of an already really good Memphis defense on top of that. I like it quite a bit.
Yeah. Memphis would have still, even if they were to move Smart, Kennard, and Clark for Jimmy Butler, Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jimmy Butler, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey, Scottie Pippen Jr., Jalen Wells, Jake LaRavia, Santi Aldama, and Jay Huff is their top 11. They're going to get Vince Williams back at some point. And Vince Williams was really good defensively last year. John Contra would be like their 12th man. They would have Cam Spencer still, who the organization is like really, really high on and really likes. Like, and on top of it, the Grizzlies have been an organization that has proven time and again, like it's really them in Miami, frankly, that they can find guys either later in the draft or in free agency and develop them into a role better than any other organization in the league. If you look in terms of picks outside of the top 20, all of, I believe it's Bane, Jalen Wells, Jake LaRavia, Santi Aldama, Vince Williams were all drafted outside of the top 20. And then Scottie Pippen Jr. and Jay Huff were picked off the proverbial scrap heap this summer, right? And they figured out these guys are really good. Like, let's sign them to two-way deals. And then they've converted them both already. So, like, if I'm Memphis, I feel like I can figure out the depth stuff. I need to take the swing on the star. In more than anything, to me, if I'm Memphis, like, I'm looking at this as like, this might be my window. Victor Wembanyama is coming. Like that's a train that is not stopping. Luka Doncic, like Dallas has kind of figured out how to build around him. Oklahoma City has Shea, they have Jalen Williams, they have Chet, they have 1,045,000 picks coming down the road. It's going to get harder to beat them, not easier. This might be as open as the window gets if you're Memphis, in all honesty. And that sucks. Like this Memphis team is super fun and I love watching it. And they're going to be really good for a long time as long as they keep Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson. But in terms of like winning a title, it's probably going to get harder, not easier from here. So I kind of like them going all in this year and trying to make it work.
I am right there with you, honestly. Like, again, you can get a guy like Jimmy Butler without even thinking about Ja, Desmond, Jaren, any of those top pieces. Like, you can build that out. And if the Jimmy thing doesn't work, then you just still have that core. And whatever you do with the flexibility after Jimmy leaves, like that's a nice needle to thread. I think they should go for it if they can.
I think so too. And like, you could probably do this giving Miami like GG Jackson and a first round pick, like your first rounder, like this year. So you don't lose flexibility moving forward down the road. Like there are real ways to get this done. I think that makes sense across the board. And like, I think there are teams that would take Marcus Smart if you don't want the Marcus Smart money. Like Detroit probably takes Marcus Smart right now for the Tim Hardaway Jr. deal in order to get another ball handler with Jaden Ivey being out. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like that would make sense to me, at least get a couple of second round picks like for Marcus Smart and for the Tim Hardaway Jr. expiring. They have enough salary cap space to where they can eat the extra $3 million. I don't know. That feels like an interesting 3-team deal to me. Here's the final thing I want to talk about with Memphis is Sky Falcon 5 in the YouTube comments brings up Jimmy on Memphis. The shooting is going to be a problem. So I disagree with this, and I don't know if you do as well, but can you explain why or why not you agree with this? Because I think Jimmy's actually like just a really underrated off-ball player who you kind of have to account for from a spacing perspective, even if he doesn't shoot it super well.
Yeah, like I don't worry as much about it just because, to your point, Jimmy can work off the ball. Like he's talked about the role, but he is a really good cutter. He is a really good and willing screener on and off the ball. Like you can make that work.
Yeah.
Obviously, you would prefer to have a whole bunch of 40% three-point shooters out there to make spacing the floor easier for you. But Memphis has been unique in the way that they've spaced around drives and stuff this year. There have been plenty of videos and articles about what the Memphis offense looks like structurally. So I think, one, he can just slot right into that without it being much of an issue. And beyond that, if you have Jimmy Butler and you have John Morant as your two best players or two best offensive players at the very least, these are two guys that are just used to and comfortable and excel in operating in tight quarters anyway.
Yeah.
Like Ja just has a short area burst and can finish and do whatever he wants. Jimmy Butler has been working within the Miami context for half a decade now. And you cited the numbers, like this has been his most efficient season from the field so far. Obviously, you want to be more ideal, but I don't worry about that being a real like ceiling limiter, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Basketball Genesis asks, what about Oklahoma City as a destination? I just don't think there's a chance in hell Oklahoma City's going down this road. This is just not what they do organizationally, just point blank.
That was one of the dark horse fits that I thought about. But I agree with what you said first and foremost. But two, even trying to get the money to work, it's incredibly tough to pull that off.
It's harder than people would expect. Like it basically would have to involve, it almost has to involve like Hartenstein, I feel like, to make the money work if they're not giving up all of their good players. The other team here is Golden State. Golden State just makes sense if you're doing like last gasp effort to try and get Jimmy Butler or try and get Stephen Curry and Draymond Green a title. Has to involve Andrew Wiggins. If I was Miami, I probably would want to forward him along to a third team. I think there are third teams that would take Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins has been pretty good this year. He looks back to his, excellent defensive self. Like I think Wiggins has actually been really, really good on defense this year for Golden State. The shooting is back. He's at 40% from three. He hasn't finished well in the interior, but I think that they could find a landing spot. Like if I was Toronto and I'm like missing, and I have the Bruce Brown deal and I'm missing a 6'8", defensive wing that can play next to Scotty Barnes. I feel like that would actually be something that would really fit, like a 40% 3-and-D shooter, bring him back to Canada. Like you're using just the Bruce Brown deal. Miami would probably be happy with Bruce Brown because Bruce Brown's a perfect fit for them for the rest of this year. Then he's expiring. Like, I don't know. And if I'm Toronto, I feel like I'm flipping Bruce Brown for Andrew Wiggins, a fit that really works for me and helps lift my defense. That's, it's kind of an
I was gonna say they Toronto need all the lift with the defense they can muster right now. So like I can definitely get there. I guess what kind of gets me stuck is not paying Jimmy Butler and then committing like 35, 40, 45 mil a year to Jonathan Kuminga. is like, I just wonder how Miami feels about that. Like, I think through the lens of let's get younger, get a young talent in the room and see what Spo does with them, it makes sense. I don't, for what Spo wants, and with like some of the quote unquote field questions with Kuminga, like I just wonder if that's an investment that he would want from Miami.
Well, you can do the deal without Kuminga. Like you could do like a 3-team deal where Miami ends up with Bruce Brown, and you could do this on February 5th, and you could involve Dennis Schroeder, because Schroeder was traded on the 15th of December, which means he's eligible to be traded again on the final 2 days of before the trade deadline. So you could do like, Wiggins, Schroeder, Gary Payton in order to make the money work. And then you could do, here's the thing. Like if I'm Golden State, would you rather have Pods or Kuminga right now?
Probably Kuminga.
Because Pods has been really bad this year. It's been a significant issue for Golden State because they built their offseason around Pods being able to be the secondary ball handler, and shit, that didn't work. Now we have to go trade for Dennis Schroeder, right? So I don't know. Like, I think I would probably rather have Kuminga than Pods at this point. But if I'm Miami, I'd probably rather have Pods than Kuminga because he's more controllable longer term. And you'd be able to figure out, you'd have more flexibility to be able to figure this whole roster out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so I guess that's just where I got to get tough, because if most of the salary coming from Golden State is likely going to be stuff that Miami ultimately doesn't want, then my question becomes like, okay, what are the picks or what are the young pieces that Miami might want out of this? Like, I think if Kuminga had another year on his deal before hitting restricted free agency, that'd be an easier thing. And if Pods wasn't having this year, it would be a very easy, okay, Miami just takes Pods.
Yeah.
The combination of the two things is where, and again, I could just be Galaxy branding it, but that's where I kind of get like, ooh, it's easy to put this deal together. I do wonder what Miami actually wants and prefers out of something like this.
And that's where we get back to where we started, right? Like what is Miami's motive? What is their incentive? What are they trying to do? And truly, like, that is, teams around the league are trying to figure that out. Like I'm telling you, I can't tell you how many like teams I talked to yesterday. Like it is hard to tell what exactly Miami's like actual goals are. People do seem to agree. And I have this in the story coming tomorrow. Like, there does seem to be an agreement that Miami does not want to take back like a crazy amount of long-term money. That was really like the only consistent thing from other people, is that like Miami probably does not want to take back a lot of long-term money, but like, are they willing to take back some long-term money? Are they willing to take back, a little bit? Like, what is the threshold they're willing to hit? I don't know the answer to that, basically. So I'm interested to find out, though. This is about as interesting as it gets on the NBA trade carousel, because Jimmy Butler can swing a title race, I think. And he's a real dude.
He's incredible. And if I could just like briefly put the hat on really quickly, it just stinks that this is how it's ending in Miami.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that to end it. So yeah, I'm glad you're doing this.
Yeah, it just stinks, because to go from, again, Big Three era into like it's Wade and Bosh, and then Bosh has the health stuff, and then what the heck is this Heat team, into James Johnson has now turned into 80% of Draymond Green for half of a year, and Deion's hitting all these game winners, into we're paying how much for who, into Jimmy Butler, into immediate finals run. And then it just turns into Jimmy doesn't have his joy and he's being suspended, and it's Jimmy versus Riley, and it's Heat media versus Jimmy Circle on Twitter. And it just stinks, as someone that has gotten to follow this and cheer for this as closely as I have. I'd hate that it's ending like this. This just felt very, even if it wasn't avoidable, it surely didn't have to get to this stage this quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because the Heat basically played this game of chicken last offseason, right? They decided not to extend Jimmy and not to trade him at the same time. So given Jimmy's track record, look, like I feel some sympathy for Miami because like this is not an ideal circumstance to deal with. And again, like this has been a fun era of Miami Heat basketball, and that title finals run was incredible. And I think basically cemented Jimmy Butler's place in the Hall of Fame. Like that's really what this was. Like Jimmy Butler's era in Miami cemented his place in the Hall of Fame. And that's not worth sneezing at if you're a Miami Heat fan. Like they had another Hall of Fame wing who now has a reputation as being one of the 3, 4, 5 best playoff performers of his generation. And that's really fucking cool. Like we shouldn't sneeze at it, but like also they kind of made their bed this summer too. You know what I mean? That's kind of the reality. Like they made their bed this summer, choosing not to extend him and choosing not to trade him. And now they have to kind of deal with the consequences. I'll say this too. I really wonder if there is a circumstance where he does not get traded until the summer.
I don't know. I don't know. Like ideally, not even ideally. I don't even like saying that. I guess like in that world, it's this suspension just turns into, hey, you just stay home.
Yeah.
Here's your money, but just stay home. We just don't even want to.
I think that's possible. Yeah.
But man, I just feel for it's just a weird situation. It really is. Like again, and Jimmy, you talk about some of the playoff moments he had. Like Jimmy wanted to be in Miami. Like he very much
100%.
embraced the organization, the culture, the fan base. Like he's playing dominoes with fans on the street. Like he sunk in like multiple interviews of I don't plan on going anywhere else. I want to retire here. And like naturally a lot of players say that and they end up getting moved anyway, etc. But like he really wanted this and the Heat embraced him as well. And so for it to be this is just really sucky, honestly.
No, it is. It's terrible for the fans. Like I do feel for them. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see where it lands. Couple of super chats here. What's the overall perception from Shibugan? Shout out to Shibugan. What's the overall perception of who's at fault here? Does this affect the Heat's chances to attract free agents long term if they're seen to be mistreating a star? I don't know that they're mistreating a star. And to be honest with you, the organization's reputation is very strong. And they're in Miami, which is a destination location for a lot of players, guys. Like a lot of dudes love Miami in the league. And Florida has no state income tax, which means they make more money off of their deals. So I don't think this is going to affect the Heat's chances long term. We've kind of talked about the perception of who's at fault here. I think this is just kind of a breakdown of everything, right? But
yeah. I would say perception, like it's probably more Miami than Jimmy. But to your point, like they dealt with LeBron leaving and they dealt with Dwayne Wade leaving and ultimately got him back and still landed. And Dame wanted to be in Miami, reportedly. And so I don't think it hits as much. I will say, like, if they aren't able to eventually like get their picks back in the room and be able to actually trade for some of these stars, I don't think it's going to be easy for them to build on that kind of reputation of landing the big name. But as far as perception goes, like I don't know if it's going to take a major hit.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Please expound on this Jimmy Butler Hall of Fame discussion. So Jimmy's 5 times All NBA, 5 times All Defense, was Eastern Conference Finals MVP in that 2023 run. I mean, it is one of the best two-way players of his era. Like I cannot imagine a world where Jimmy Butler does not end up in the Hall of Fame. Like it would be wild to me. Like we're talking about guys like Sean Marion, and like I'm generally in favor of Sean Marion like having a case to be in the Hall of Fame.
He should be in.
I don't really even think it's a conversation that he's going to end up in the Hall of Fame. I don't really know if I have a lot of other final thoughts here, Nekias. I'll just ask you this final question. Like, do you have any other strong takes you have to get off of about the NBA?
I guess my hot take is that the NBA is good and the basketball is generally good, and I like watching it. And teams do indeed try to play defense. It's just really tough to do that because offenses are good. and teams make adjustments. Sometimes they just don't work because these players are good. And Sam Hauser was fine taking that corner three. Like, that's probably all
God.
I got. Like,
my God, Nekias. I was losing my fucking mind watching that thing. Like, Kenny Smith goes up. The Celtics create a perfect wide open corner three for Sam Hauser with Rudy Gobert closing out on him. Sam Hauser, like a 45% 3-point shooter, like misses the three. It's a wide open look. Like, he probably didn't even notice Gobert being there, in all honesty. And then the second one is
it's a set play.
Tatum's on the wing. Pritchard passes the ball to the left wing to Tatum, then goes down to the corner, sets a screen, and then I forget who it was. Whoever was in the corner came around and set a wrap pin. Is essentially like a wrap pin play for Pritchard to come up and like take a three. That was the whole point of the fucking play. And Kenny Smith is like, what are we doing here? Like, this is a wide open driving lane for Jason Tatum. Why isn't he driving? Like, I love that studio show. I do. I don't go for the basketball. I go because it's incredibly fun. It's enjoyable. I have a blast watching it. But like, we got to do a little bit better on the basketball. We just got to do a little bit better. Like, you guys played in the NBA, for fuck's sake. Like, come on.
Yeah, like I ended up tweeting about it. I was like, there could have been a conversation had about like, you know, Boston's 3-point rate is through the roof. Like, this is a lower rim rate that they had than last year. And like with the increase of switching that they're seeing, like you could make that a conversation to have. But when the example is the Sam Hauser three and a very obvious set piece happening, you can't even have the actual basketball conversation. Now we're talking about the presentation versus like the general point, which I don't agree with it. I don't think it's awful in a vacuum. It was just poorly framed. And now we're here.
I just like I could not believe that when I saw that. I was like, what in the world are we doing? By the way, like, if you guys want to know like what basketball can be, watch that Spurs Nuggets game last night.
Yes.
I mean, anybody that would watch that game and be like, oh, like the NBA, it's fucked. Like it's not good. It's things are going downhill. Watch that game and watch Jokic and watch Wembanyama and watch the way those two teams play. Like, that was fucking incredible, guys. Like, there is more skill. Here's my hot take. A 7'5" dude from France with an 8-foot wingspan who can step away and shoot 15 threes in a game and make 6 of them and also be the best defensive player in the league. That's actually good. Think about if you told somebody that 30 years ago, that in 30 years, there's going to be this dude from France who is 7'5". He can create his own shot. He can break down dudes off the dribble. He shoots 15 threes a game. And he also is the best defensive player in the rim because he blocks 4 shots a game. Like,
hey, you know, Ralph Sampson, like, turned the sliders all the way up. And I mean all the way up. Like, it's
like I see people bring up Ralph Sampson with Wemby. And I'm like, guys, like, I've watched a good amount of Ralph Sampson at this point because I watched all of those, you know, generational bigs a lot 2 years ago when Wemby was coming through the draft, just to kind of understand it. Honestly, do you know who the best one that I thought was? Fucking Shaq. Shaq was unbe-fucking-leavable at LSU. He was so good. He was incredible at LSU. Like, you could not do anything. He was the most athletic dude on the court. He was the strongest dude on the court. Nobody had any chance to do anything with Shaq. But man, like, you watch Ralph Sampson, and you could say it's purely because he came up in a different era, and I'll listen to that. Like, I truly will.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't this.
It wasn't this. Like, yes, like, I'm willing to hear out, like, Ralph Sampson, if he came up in this era, would have shot 10 threes a game and would have done this. Like, he had all those skills. Yes, like, you might be right about that, but it didn't happen. Like, it didn't happen, guys. Like, Ralph Sampson was an unbelievable player, and the NBA got robbed of not getting to see him at his best in the league for more than a few years at the start of his career. But I mean, like the way Wemby moves, like the coordination, the balance, particularly, like it's just a different beast.
He is so special, and I am so glad. Like selfishly, I'm so glad that like he's having this year while Chris Paul is there, so I just have the excuse to watch both of them at the same time. But no, he's incredible. I guess the other random note that I would throw out as we're talking about great basketball games, Thunder Knicks was a blast, and shout out Aaron Wiggins. Just shout out Aaron Wiggins.
Good player, man. Like
he's been good player. He's been good for a minute. I'm glad that he's getting this kind of burn on this version of the Thunder.
I remember I texted Schlecht like in November, like early November, and I was like, I kind of think Aaron Wiggins might end up being their fifth guy that closes games, like in the playoffs, because he's like okay on defense. He can really shoot it. He's comfortable putting the ball on the floor. Like it's kind of hard to find the flaws, the fifth player on the court, really, as long as he's making shots. And they're going to mix and match depending on who they're playing. Like they'll go too big at times. I think they'll go, Chet at the 5 only. They'll go Hartenstein at the 5 probably. Like they're going to figure it out on the fly probably, I would imagine. But like, yeah, like he has the ability to play at the end of games in playoff situations. Like Aaron Wiggins is a good basketball player.
Yeah, the Thunder building out this team where they can just close with like 9 different people if they want is pretty cool. And the fact, just kind of zooming out, their defense has been freaking insane all year long. And like 40% of that was like without a center. And now this large chunk has been without Chet, he was legit just playing at a D-point level before he got hurt.
Yeah.
Like the top 3 was probably him, Wemby, and like I'd probably say Evan Mobley or maybe Anthony Davis. Like in some order, it was those 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And they're still just
Aaron Jackson, Bam, like those 2, like those are your 5, I would say.
And they're still this as a unit. Like it was like that Knicks game was really intriguing just to see like Jalen Williams, you're going to take on the Cat assignment. We'll still try to send help when we can. And Cat was having some fun on the glass in particular. But OKC turns up the heat. Once they get stops, like it's just tough. And like they didn't have their best transition. I was watching the game at some point. It was like a 91.7 offensive rating in transition for OKC. I was like, okay, this just isn't them. Like Steve made the great point about them pressing the turbo button a little bit too much. And it's just like they still won that game off the back of Aaron Wiggins turning up.
It's crazy.
They're a great basketball team. I love watching.
They're a fantastic basketball team. They're probably the team I most enjoy watching right now, I would say, because I love the way that they defend. I love the way that they pre-rotate a lot of the time to try and find different ways to stop teams. Like they'll have guys like rotate literally from the opposite corner to from the strong corner or the weak corner all the way over to the strong corner, like as the ball gets swung. Like they really are good and anticipatory in terms of the way that they try and figure out how to problem solve on defense. Like they're just so well coached. I think Dagnall does an amazing job. I'm really interested to see how Dagnall is able to adjust. I think that is the one thing with him that I would like to see more of is what is it going to look like when he's in a playoff setting? Can he consistently adjust? I didn't love what I saw against the Bucks, for instance, in the NBA Cup final, but like, I think that they're a really good basketball team, and I think it's going to be them. And like I said, them and the Celtics in the preseason in the finals, and I still haven't seen a whole lot of reason to shift off of that yet. Maybe the Cavs are a reason to shift off of that, but yeah, I mean, Oklahoma City is absolutely fantastic. Nekias, I've kept you for 20 minutes past when I told you I would. Please tell the people where they can find your work. Please tell the people about the Dunker Spot. Please tell the people everything that they need to know.
Well, please subscribe to the Dunker Spot if you haven't already. It is me and Steve Jones Jr. breaking things down twice a week, every week. We're bouncing around the NBA naturally as Unrivaled kicks off. We'll be talking about Unrivaled. As the W season comes back, we'll be talking about the W. It's just year-round basketball talk, X's and O's. We try to eliminate as much of the narrative as we can. We want to talk about why these teams are good or interesting and why. And so if you want that kind of analysis, that's what we provide. We're hosting online watch parties just about every night. So if you have a League Pass subscription, it's free to create your profile. But if you have a League Pass, you can actually watch games alongside us. We also like break down some stuff. If we have end of game stuff, I'll pull up a second screen. We'll slow-mo the clip, talk about what happened, why, that kind of thing. We're also just incredibly random in there. A lot of jokes. Video games are played in there. Like it's a wild space complimentary. So you can rock with us there. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Nekias NBA. You can catch some streams from Steve and I starting this Wednesday, every Wednesday, I think at 6 Eastern. We'll just be bouncing around with different topics around the NBA every week. You'll be soon seeing more of my words at Bleacher Report moving forward. I think that's everything.
As I've said before on this show, I do not listen to basketball podcasts, just point blank. Whenever I'm not watching basketball or like writing about it or recording, I do not engage for the most part. I will read books. I will watch all of the movies that you see behind me. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm trying to get away from the game. Their podcast is the only thing I will turn on from time to time. I think that their podcast is outstanding. It's one of my favorite things that is currently going in the basketball content ecosystem. They do an amazing job, and I would recommend everybody subscribe to it. Speaking of subscribing, I think that fearless leader of the show, GMAC, would stab me if I did not say go subscribe to the YouTube channel and go subscribe to all of the social media platforms that he runs. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky is there too. Like, go subscribe to everything we've got. This is a bonus episode. Bryce will be back tomorrow. We're still doing the normal Sunday show. I just really wanted to talk about the Jimmy thing. We'll probably talk a little bit about that at the top. Nothing crazy though. And then we'll dive into some other stuff that Bryce and I have wanted to talk about here for a minute because it's been a crazy, crazy season. Nekias, do you have something you have to say?
Oh, yeah, just a very quick thing, as I saw a couple of comments. To watch along with us, I'm used to doing this like on our YouTube episode, and the link is just in the podcast description. Playback.tv/The Dunker Spot is where you can find our watch party room. And from there, create your profile, link up your league pass, and you can watch some hoops with us.
Go subscribe to that. Do whatever you can to do that. Nekias, send me the link, and I'll put that in the YouTube description as well for you. Yeah, we'll be back on Sunday. I will have an article coming on Sunday breaking down in a little bit more detail even than what we did here, the various Jimmy Butler scenarios that make sense, along with some reporting from all the calls I made yesterday. So please go subscribe to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. Until next time, though, we'll talk soon.